Welcome to the New York Historical Society and to the exhibition, First Jewish Americans, Freedom and Culture in the New World. I'm Louise Mirror, New York Historical's President and CEO, and it is a great pleasure for me to introduce you to this wonderful online tour of the exhibition. We begin our story with a document that had not been seen by the public for many decades. And that is a document that had been removed from the Mexican National Archives, where it resided since the time in the 16th century that Spain carried its Inquisition prohibiting Jewish worship from 1492 in Spain all the way into the New World. The story begins with a document which is really a marvelous autobiography produced by a young man not quite 30 years old, called Luis de Carvajal. Luis de Carvajal had joined members of his family in a very large part of Mexico that actually adjoins what is today Texas, counting him as one of our first Jewish Americans. Carvajal was very intent on finding a way to continue practicing his Jewish faith and hoped to find the freedom to do so in the New World. Sadly, that turned out not to be the case, and Luis de Carvajal was imprisoned by the Inquisition in Mexico together with 120 members of his community and family, and he was burned at the stake together with some members of his family at the end of the 16th century. The sad story of Luis de Carvajal, very happily, is not mimicked in much of the rest of the story that this exhibition tells. A much happier story of Jews finding freedom and the ability to practice their faith and to integrate well into American culture. We continue our story on a much happier note when the first 23 Jews arrived actually on the shores of this city, New York City, and found freedom here. Not initially. They were Jews who were fleeing the Portuguese Inquisition in Recife, which had been Dutch. They'd been members of that community. When the Portuguese retook Recife in northern Brazil from the Dutch, they imposed the Inquisition once again, and Jews were forced to flee. These 23 Jews did not, as many of their brethren did, go back to Amsterdam, but somehow found their way to New York City. They were greeted, not in a friendly manner, by Peter Stuyvesant, whose portrait is in this exhibition, together with many documents reflecting the first congregation they established, Shearith Israel in New York. But the Jews appealed to their Dutch brethren for the ability to stay in New York and to practice their religion as Jews, and they won. The story continues with many objects and documents that show how not only did the Jewish community establish itself in New York, but also in Philadelphia and Charleston. In a way, this exhibition is a tale of three cities, the three cities that beginning in the 17th century and going through the end of the exhibition in the mid-19th century were the most heavily populated by Jewish Americans. There are many, many features of this exhibition that show why Jews were so grateful to arrive on the shores of what would become the United States of America, as this was the very first place that they were actually allowed to become both Jewish and citizens of their nation.